Ahsoka is released on Disney+. It's the 31st anniversary of the McDonald's hot coffee lawsuit, and we're going to discuss why moving out of the marital residence when you're facing a divorce might be great or might be terrible. This is the Lawyer Dana Show. So the hot coffee lawsuit, it was a big deal. It was the year I graduated from high school. It was the laugh and joke capital of the year. It was that somebody spilled hot coffee on themselves and got $20 million from McDonald's. Well, the reality of that case is far from. It wasn't a $20 million case. It wasn't a $5 million case. In fact, the jury in New Mexico announced its verdict in one of the most infamous and misunderstood cases in recent memories. The case name was Liebig versus McDonald's, known as the hot coffee lawsuit. This case, according to Brandon Metheny, it's held up as one of the most egregious examples of frivolous lawsuits. The story goes that a woman bought coffee from McDonald's, drove with it between her legs, spilled it on herself, sued McDonald's, and because it was hot, she took home a cool $1 to $5 million, depending on who's telling the story. I've heard it as high as $20 million. I've heard it as high as $100 million, actually. And then wait, she sued because the coffee was hot and she was driving with it between her legs? What did she expect? Anyone can sue for anything these days. Well, guess what? That story is almost completely false. Stella did have hot coffee spill on her. That part's true. But here's what's not. Stella was not driving. The 79-year-old was in the passenger seat of her grandson's car. He pulled into a parking spot where she was trying to add cream and sugar to her coffee. The car didn't have cup holders, so she put it in between her legs. When she pulled the lid off, it spilled all over her. The spilled coffee wasn't just unpleasant. It was served at nearly 190 degrees, which caused third-degree burns over 6% of her body. It required multiple skin grafts, necessitated further care after she left the hospital, and left her permanently disfigured. She originally tried to settle with McDonald's and asked for $20,000. McDonald's responded with an offer of $800. At that point, Stella hired an attorney who discovered that 1. McDonald's required franchisees to serve the coffee between 180 and 190 degrees. 2. No other coffee in the city was served at more than 160 degrees. 3. 190-degree liquid causes third-degree burns in less than 3 seconds and would burn the mouth if consumed at that temperature. 4. 160-degree liquid takes over 20 seconds to cause third-degree burns. And 5. McDonald's had been sued over 700 times in the prior decade for coffee being too hot, and had settled up to $500,000 in cases that had been told to lower the temperature. Unfortunately, McDonald's refused an arbitrator's suggestion of a $225,000 settlement, and the case went to trial, where a jury ultimately rewarded Stella $200,000 in compensatory damages and $2.7 million in punitive damages. Aha, you say. So she still got millions. That's still frivolous. Well, no. First, the jury found Stella was 20% at fault, so the compensatory damages were reduced by that amount to $160,000. Then, the judge reduced the punitive damages to 3 times the compensatory, or $480,000. That's a total of $640,000. We don't know how much Stella actually got because they eventually settled for less than $600,000. But between medical expenses and legal fees, that's a far cry from the millions she supposedly got for a slightly warmed leg in the well-known story. So how did this become so legendary? Simple. McDonald's knew the case was going poorly, so it looked to the one thing it had. Stella didn't have a bully pulpit. They started a massive PR effort, and it was basically a smear campaign painting Stella as some kind of irresponsible scofflaw trying to take their hard-earned money. And it worked.
It seems she was holding a cup between her legs while driving.
Clamped it between her legs, drove down the street, spilled it, burned herself, sued McDonald's, and collected.
To the point that the annual awards for frivolous lawsuits are known as the Stellas. Well, as for Stella, The then 81-year-old didn't have the money, platform, or desire to fight back. She used the money to pay for a live-in nurse. She watched company after company use her case as an excuse for tort reform to stop the big bad consumers from hurting the poor multinational billion-dollar corporations. Before she passed away in 2004 at the age of 91. I have heard about this case since high school, through law school, all throughout my career. I've seen tort reform get to the point to where the limits on medical malpractice in Texas almost completely preclude people from filing the cases. I know friends of mine that say they're just not worth it because they can't prosecute them. It costs tremendous amounts of money. They don't get their money back out of the cases, and it's really a detriment to consumers and the general public who have difficulties that they go into court to resolve. But it's very, very difficult for them. So what's the lesson? The lesson is propaganda is massively powerful, and it's happening over and over, and this podcast is here to reveal some truth to you.
We are no Jedi.
I started hearing whispers.
Ahsoka. Disney released Ahsoka early. It was scheduled to be on Wednesday the 23rd. Instead, came out on Tuesday the 22nd at 6 p.m. They're changing their release schedules. I just found this out today. We are here on it's August 23rd, and theoretically I could go watch it. Instead, I'm doing this podcast for you because I love you. So check it out. We're really excited about some of the performances. It's Ray Stevens' final performance. He's one of my favorite actors. I'm really looking forward to it. I hope that Kathleen Kennedy did not inject too much of the woke agenda into this program. It does look like it could be a lot of female characters in it, but it's not female characters that is an issue. I mean, Leia is one of my absolute favorite characters of all time, and so is Ahsoka. And Sabine Wren, who I think may be in it, she's a great character too. I really loved the cartoon version when they were doing these stories in Rebels, and this is a series I'm really looking forward to. I'm going to watch it. I'll report back to you, and really, I hope I like it. I know if it's Jon Favreau involved in it, they're going to serve it as the fans want. We really love those characters. I hope it plays out well. I hope there's some Luke Skywalker and some real Star Wars stuff in it, but we will see, and we'll get back to you on that. Okay, so we had a comment by @LindaWilson4625 that there should be changes in divorce laws that allow a person to leave the residence without having the deck stacked against them. I've watched way too many murder shows where divorcing couples, especially forced to stay with an active cheater, they stayed in the same house trying not to get taken to the cleaners in court. There should not be a penalty for leaving the residence. Well, Linda, under the law, there really isn't a penalty for leaving the residence. But strategically, here is how it plays out. If one person wants the residence and the other person leaves, if there's plenty of other assets to offset that, it doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, I literally recommended to a client yesterday in an initial consultation, I said, you should not only not worry about leaving the residence, you should go get your stuff right now and leave. There's no reason for you to be there. But it completely depends on certain things. If the only asset is the residence and one person moves out and is counting on the other one to come to an agreement about that, well, the one that's staying in the house, what happens if they don't pay for the house? Well, then the other person has to pay for the house. Well, what if the other person doesn't have enough money to pay for the house? The person staying in the house might refuse to pay, and then the other person winds up having to still pay for the house, or their credit gets ruined. So the person who's living in the house, they have what they want, and the other person has to pay for it. Well, they'll not agree to a settlement, and they'll make you go all the way through trial. That might take 2 years. In the meantime, you're paying for that house for the next 2 years. And what if that person has a higher income? Like, for example, the one staying in the house has a $20,000 income. The one leaving the house has a $150,000 income. Well, the one with a $20,000 income is having their house paid for. They're living for free. and the other person's out of the house, you'll never get them to come to an agreement. They'll have every incentive to drag the divorce out for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, however many years that they possibly can. That's because essentially what you've done is you've paid them first. You've given them what they want without getting what you need or what you want. If the people are staying in the house, then they may both be equally incentivized to settle the case quickly, because if they want the other person out of the house, well, as soon as you give them that, they've got what they want, and they won't give that person what they want. A lot of the times it's a strategic play based on the reality of the situation. But there's nothing actually under the law that, at least in Texas, that takes away someone's rights to a house just because they've moved away. As a matter of fact, it does anything but that. It keeps their ownership interest in the house intact, but it can literally just be a logistics or a cash flow issue about how they could be leveraged to not be able to get to an agreement, because all divorces are ended one of 2 ways, either by an agreement or by a full and final trial. Well, if they're going to be worse off after the trial, then why would they agree to that until the last possible minute? They have nothing to lose by going to the trial. And therefore, instead of a maybe $10,000 a side agreement, now you're going to have to pay $100,000 per side trial. And the person that has the house has a lot more leverage against the other person just based on those type of things. So there's nothing really under the law, but it's a practical purposes. The good news, though, is that there's a lot of ways around that particular problem, and not everybody has that problem. Some people do, some people don't. The only way for you to really know is consult with a very high-quality attorney in the area that practices in the courts that you're there for. Have an actual consultation with them, pay them for their advice for that hour or however long it is that you need, and get the legal advice and the legal help that you need. Thank you for your question. We'll see you in the next one. This is The Lawyer Dana Show.